Where do we go? Okay, no more birthdays. We have one speaker tonight. Please give our speaker, Denny, a warm welcome.
How you doing, everybody? My name's Denny, and I'm an alcoholic. That's the good news. I used to drink at a bar where they used to say, "Is he gone yet?" So things are different tonight. I have a lot of friends here. Barry, Jeff. I mean, there's just great to see Wayne and Joe, my dear friend Joe, and Dave, and Rufus and Bobby. I mean, I know a lot of people here, and it's nice. What AA has done to me is just pretty amazing. I want to congratulate all the chip takers, the birthday people, and especially welcome our newcomers. I hope you find here what I found here, because it's a pretty damn good deal. What did I want to say? Oh, I wanted to give you my sobriety date is January the 2nd, 1991. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor. That's the way it works around here. So I'm 15 years sober. I'm married 39 years. So that leaves 24 unaccounted for. Yeah, some of those were pretty good. Some of those were pretty bad. Some should have never been scheduled, you know. And I'm glad she stuck with me through all of this, you know, because I think it just made it a little bit easier for me to, you know how they talk about don't change anything in your first year. Don't change anything in your first 30 years for me, you know, but I'm glad we're still together, and it's really an honor to be here. I've talked at this hall several times, and I really enjoy talking here. You can just feel the love, and you can feel there's just no bullshit here, you know. Everywhere that we go before we get sober, it's just you're surrounded by it, and you come in here, you know that this is all about the truth and the honest. So I'll tell you a little bit what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and thank God they were all really different. I come from eastern Pennsylvania, back in the coal regions back there, and you know, I came from a family that was not just churchgoers. We were immersed in the church. My mom was a church secretary, my father a deacon, my grandfather an elder, my sister, my brother, my grandmother sang on the church choir, and the best I could do was to steal money out of the collection plate. You know, I'm a musician, so by trade, and ever since I was 13 years old, I was working in the gin mills. That's what they called them. The gin mills, Saturday night, you get home at 3:30 in the morning, my mom would come in, she'd kick the bed in the morning at 8:30, and she'd say, "Get up, you're going to church, goddammit." And I went, "Isn't that a mixed message, Mom?" And I'd get up and I'd go to church, you know, and I'd go to Sunday school, and in Sunday school, I learned that if I got this job of going around to the different groups and taking the seventh tradition, you know, the offerings, take them down to the church office, count it up, steal a quarter, go across the street, have a smoke and a Coke, and wait for the damn thing to be over. I could miss Sunday school, because next I had to sit in the back pew of the church with my granddad and keep him awake. Now, there was no alcoholism in my family. I never saw my dad drunk. Like, even when I was trying to be good, he was never that drunk. My grandfather used to have a drink now and again, but wasn't an alcoholic like I am, you know. So, but every once in a while, my granddad, he had a bit of the rebel in him. Between Sunday school and church, he'd jump in his old Plymouth and go down to the American Legion home and have a shot and a beer and come back, you know, in that 15-minute window. And then he'd sit in the back of the church and, you know, he'd start nodding off, and I'd be sitting next to him. And the choir loft would just go, wake him up, and I'd have to wake Granddad up. So I thought that was so cool, you know. I wanted to be Granddad, you know. Now, as I told you, since I worked in the gin mills Saturday night, I was 13 years old. The older guys, some guys as old as 40, you know. That's how I got my first drink, though. We're working a job one night, and one of the guys says, "Hey, get the kid a drink." I don't know how I became an alcoholic, because that first drink was a slow gin fizz. Some red garbage, I don't know. But I probably would have drank it at the end of my drinking as well. I mean, but you know, I took that thing, and what happened was, it went down, and all of a sudden it was like the missing link. Just everything was right after that drink went into its place. And it really was I had no idea how big of a deal that was at the time. So alcohol worked for me quite a while, and you know, I had a lot of fun in school. In fact, I had so much fun in school, they asked me to stay back in the 11th grade and show the kids coming up behind me how to have that much fun before leaving school, you know, fun kid. And got out of school, and they were going to draft me to Vietnam, so I said, what the hell are they going to do with a drummer in Vietnam? I better get out of this somehow, and went to Washington, D.C. and got into this Navy music program. So I spent 4 years, 1 month, 17 days, 11 hours, and 39 minutes in the Navy. But it was good. It was really good. By the time I got to the Navy, you know, I grew up in Pennsylvania where the guys that worked in the coal mines, they'd go to the taverns after work. And they either worked in the coal mines or the Bethlehem Steel Company. And for 35 cents, you got a shot of Christian Brothers brandy and a short beer. You know, if you had another 15 cents in your pocket, you'd get a slice of hot bologna and a hard-boiled egg pickled in red beet juice. After that, you had enough gas to fly to Cleveland. But, you know, for $5, you could lose your car. And I did on many occasions, you know. But that's the way they drank there. They were all hard guys, you know. They worked in the mines at the steel companies. They came in, it was shuffleboard and darts and drinking. And that's kind of the way I learned how to drink, you know, and there was nothing polite about it. It worked for me for such a long time. I can't believe it, though. We went to South America when I was in this Navy band thing. They sent us down there to represent the United States, you know, like, you stick some guys out at sea with no women around or no booze around for a couple of weeks, stick a white uniform on, and then let them go free in some foreign town. There's a lot of goodwill created, you know, and that's what we did, you know. But there I am broadening my horizons. It's no longer a shot in a beer. Now it's Pisco Sour and Vino Tinto and all of this great stuff, you know. So I still can't believe that I was in South America in 1963 and I was in Colombia. Didn't do any cocaine. I didn't know what cocaine was. I didn't know what marijuana was. So anyway, my last job in the service, I was stationed on the Admiral of the 6th Fleet's ship in the south of France. You know, he had a band, and so here I am stationed on the south of France, and we used to play the Star Spangled Banner in the morning. It would piss the tourists off, so they asked us not to do that. So we had to show up like once every 4 days. You go in and you buy a bottle of Chivas Regal 12-year-old for $3. A carton of cigarettes was $1, and I'd go back to my apartment in Nice, France, and I'd drink Chateau Neuf de Pape and Nuit Saint-Georges and Saint-Estèphe and all these great wines, you know, like I'm broadening my horizons some more. And so I'm drinking all this great wine. I'm learning about cognac. I'm learning to drink like a gentleman, you know. Then my ship would go to Beirut, Lebanon, and we'd come back with all this stuff called hashish, you know. So I'm broadening my horizons a little bit more. I'm trying to work my way up, you know, but this stuff is just working and working and working. I met my wife when I was stationed in the south of France, you know, and we're still married. And that's a miracle. So we got out of the service, went to New York to start my career, and that seemed like I was pretty good at what I did, so I thought, why don't you just go to the best place in the world? At the time, it was New York. Went into the city, and I met all of the people, all the musicians that I was so in awe of. I knew all of their work from records, and I met them, and I got to work with them, and they had needles hanging out their arms. They were so drunk they could hardly talk. You know, they were my heroes. And it really, I just didn't know how to take it, and I felt, well, if that's what you got to do to make that kind of music, where do I go to get in line, you know? And so I did. I mean, I got really lucky and landed a big job in New York. Didn't pay nothing, but it was a very prestigious old jazz club, and I got to work with my heroes. And, you know, and in doing that, all of a sudden, the New York musical community used to come to this club to hear the guys play. And because I was part of it, they brought me right in. No longer was I working the little gig that paid no money, but it had a lot of prestige. Pretty soon I started getting called for the recording sessions and stuff, TV commercials and record albums and movies and stuff. And you go to work, and I'll be damned if the guy you're working for doesn't bring some booze and some drugs, you know. Some pot, some coke, bottle of booze, some wine or something, you know. I thought it was part of the pay. So I made sure to get mine, you know. And this is around 1967, and we started working 18-hour days. We'd do 3 jingles in the morning, 3 commercials in the morning, do a couple of record dates in the afternoon, and go work in the joints at night, you know. So when you're putting in an 18-hour day, the only way to stay awake was with that stuff, you know. So in 1967, they were telling us that cocaine wasn't addictive. It was just nature's way of telling you you're making too much money here, you know, a little check. And so for a couple of years I did that, and I didn't like it anymore, and I just stopped. By this time, a guy from New York, a guy from England came to New York, kind of a really major guy in the pop world. And he auditioned some of the musicians, and he hired me to do this record. So now my career just goes right through the roof, having worked with this guy, you know. And we do this record. It's very successful. I'm getting all the best work in town. 6 months after the record is out, he says, "Hey, would you and your wife like to come to England and just hang out a little bit?" I said, "Sure." We go over to England, and he says, "Let's put a band together." Now, this guy was in a major band. So I said, "Oh, that's the end to all of that cocaine, those 18-hour days, that, you know, that hard living. This is going to be a piece of cake. It's a big band, lots of money. My ship has arrived, and I didn't go to the airport to meet it this time, you know." So we move over to England. We're over there. The band gets really successful really fast. We're out there touring, making records, and all of this stuff. And we're all supposed to participate from the money. And the money ain't coming. We're all on salaries and stuff, but it's not trickling down, you know. And the guys are starting to get bugged, and they're coming over to my apartment at night, and we sit around and we talk. I'm in one of the top bands in the world, and I'm living in a basement apartment. It was a funky little place, so I kind of liked it. But the guys would come over, and we'd just get more loaded and more loaded every night. Alcohol's still working, but it's changing. You know, that's what this disease does. When the disease gets a hold of you, it changes. No longer is it fun anymore, but all of a sudden we're like drinking to solve some problems that we have. We're drinking to solve problems that are caused by our drinking. What we're doing, you know. So we're sitting around complaining, and I stayed 3 or 4 years, about as much as I could stay. And then one night, the straw in the camel's back. You know, I had enough, and I called the guy up. There was a limousine in front of my apartment to take me to the airport. We're going to Lagos, Nigeria, to record his best-selling record, and we were all rehearsed, ready to go with this thing. And I called him up, and I said, "You know what? I'm done. Good alcoholic thinking. I'm done. You." Slam dunk, you know, because I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that one of my character defects is a retaliator. Like, I'll get you. You get me, I'll find a time, but I'll get you back, you know. So what I didn't know was that night when I left the band and we came back to the States, I had given birth to my first resentment. You know, the big book talks about resentment being the #1 offender. It has the power to kill us. And it really does. I'm living proof here. So my drinking had changed that night. Every drink I took now was at that guy. I'll show you. I'll kill myself slowly, you know. Brilliant thinking. You know, you're going to hear around here that resentment is like taking poison and expecting someone else to die. And that's exactly what I was doing. Went back to New York. My wife and I left England, and I didn't want to get back into that rat race again. So we said, let's go to California, because with my credentials and everything, I always wanted to play in the big studio orchestras, to do the film music, you know. I said, with my credentials, they'll just say, "Wow, we were waiting for you. Come on, let's go." You know, everything was going to be great again. So get to California, and this California music world says, "Who the hell are you, and who sent for you?" Now I got 2 resentments. Now all I can do is drink. My wife starts working, and I'm drinking. I'm drinking up at the casting office. It opens up 10:30 in the morning, and I can't wait till that door opens to get in there with my lower companions and just drown my sorrows. My wife goes to work. She starts doing good in her job. She comes home a little bit later every night, and a perfect day for her. She comes home when I'm passed out on the couch. If I'm blacked out, passed out on the couch, it's the end to a perfect day. She doesn't have to deal with my sorry ass. So I wake up 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I slither into the bedroom and get in bed with her and try to not wake her up, you know. Then she gets up for work at 5:30 in the morning. And I could never figure out how a woman made so much noise just getting dressed, you know, but it was just enough to wake my sorry ass up and give me that look. You know, some of you guys know what that look is. I didn't want to live like that. You know, I wanted to be the guy that she married, but this thing was killing me. How could I get screwed out of all that money? And I had no tools how to deal with it, you know. So, man, it just got worse and worse and worse. I finally went to my family doctor. I said, Ralph, I think I got a drinking problem. He said, well, if you have a drinking problem, there's only one thing that works. I said, what's that? He said, Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, what else you got? Absolutely. I mean, I wasn't ready. How can you face a meal without a fine red wine? Or cognac after, or a couple of lines of Coke, maybe 3 or 4 joints, a bottle of wine, and something else before sex, you know. I just couldn't imagine life without all of my fixes, you know. So I tried acupuncture. I told you, we're smart. So I tried acupuncture, and it worked for 6 months, and then the disease says, you're okay. You can drink again. And I started. And as we all know, you start, and it starts. So a little time goes by, and I knew it was back. It was on again, and I said, well, what else can I do? Hypnosis. I wasn't ready to give up my right to throw up, you know. I mean, I really like to drink a bottle of booze, act a fool, and then go out back and throw it all up, you know. And you know, that again, it worked for 6 months, and I was all better. About the same time now, I'm out playing golf. It's good enough for Bill Wilson, it's good enough for me. But I'm out playing golf, and I'm starting to get chest pains. Now, you know, I did a lot of blow, I did a lot of pot, I did lots of cognac. That's really good for the heart, too. So I'm getting these chest pains, and I call that same doctor back, and I said, Ralph, I'm starting to feel funny in my chest, you know, like somebody's sitting on me. He says, well, I think we got to go see my other buddy, Steve, who's a cardiologist over here at St. John's. And he says, you know Steve, he plays piano, because all these doctor friends of mine are like musicians on the side. So, I mean, they know me. They know what I do. And I went to see Steve, and he took a look at me, and he said, I think we're going to bring you into the hospital and see what's going on here, because this could be serious. And it was 1986. It was my wife and I were celebrating our 20th anniversary, and it was Thanksgiving. So I'm in the hospital. They got me in the cath lab. They got me screwed up on some really, really good hospital dope. You know, you don't give a shit what they do to you. I mean, you're awake, but anything you want to do is fine with me. There's monitors all around the cath lab, you know, and he's in there. He's fiddling around with this stuff. You know, I got a thing up in my heart. And he says, "Ooh, we found a blockage in your arteries." He said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to stick a balloon in there. We're going to pop it open, and you're going to be great. He says, I don't want you to worry about anything. We got a pacemaker. We got all this stuff. He said, we got you covered. And as he's saying that, the nurse said, he's going, he's going, he's gone. And I did one of those. I died for a minute, you know, did the hovering down. And it's not that unusual around Alcoholics Anonymous, believe it or not. A lot of us have been there, but you know, they didn't tell me how long I was gone, but when I woke up, you know, I think God was saying, hey, knucklehead, I got to talk to you. And I got out of that little procedure, and the weekend was over, and I went back home, and I asked, before I left, I said to my doctor, I said, okay, Steve, come on, man, you know me. What can I do? He said, well, you can never do cocaine again. Okay. What about pot? He said, well, you know, pot really speeds up the heart. So I said, okay, I'll be careful. I said, well, what about booze? He says, well, on the other hand, they found that a glass of white wine a day is really good for the circulation, you know. So on the way home from the hospital, after all, it was, you know, it was Thanksgiving, our 20th anniversary, a near-death experience. I'm in a limo. My buddy sends a car to take us home from the hospital, a nice treat. And in 1986, you know, before cell phones, there's a phone there in the car, a car phone. So I got to use it. So I use the car phone and call my dope dealer, and I go get a little bag of weed. And then I stopped at Vendome Liquor, and I got 2 bottles of Circulation. I wanted to make sure I had that. You know, you don't want to mess around with that Circulation stuff. And I went home and I started 1 glass of white wine a day. That much of a hit on the joint, running around Lake Hollywood, eating nothing but vegetables and fish, and I hate them both. I was scared, but you know, I changed my life, and I got better, and I got better, and each time I'd go to see the doctor, I'd burn that treadmill up, and pretty soon the disease starts talking. You're getting better, you're getting better. You can have more than just 1 glass of wine. You can have a whole joint. You can have a cognac afterward. I'm at work. I had a bump. So it took some time. I'm glad that those last 5 years were horrible, because it wouldn't have got my attention if it wasn't, you know. But over that time period, it started getting really nasty, and I knew I had to get sober, and I got sober, and I started going to meetings. And actually, I got sober September 17th, 1990, where I stopped drinking, but I still smoked joints, you know. I probably should have gone to a detox, because I did vast quantities of alcohol. I worked for a club owner that says, I can't afford to pay you what you're worth, so drink as much as you like.
Nice.
Say that to a practicing alcoholic. And the girls that worked there, they all hated him, so they just kept pouring, you know, and they never told him how much I was drinking, so thank you, Craig. But, you know, I got to Alcoholics Anonymous here, and I wanted to change my life, but I'm still smoking the herb, so I detoxed with the herb. Went to 1 meeting a week, Wednesday night Comedy Store rush hour meeting. They used to have a meeting at 5 o'clock. And I started hearing the message. You know, I started hearing the music of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I knew that there was a way out. January the 2nd is not because my sober date is not because I had a bad New Year's Eve. It was because of my grandmother's birthday. And I thought that I would hold this date with some reverence, so let me get sober for my grandmother and me. So New Year's Eve, I worked with the band. I had 20 joints rolled up. I had a 2-gram vial of blow, and I had a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne, because I wasn't drinking, damn it. And so I got done with that, and next day I'm going to a lot of meetings now, and I'm going to Radford and Chandler Lodge over there in the valley, and I see this guy, Scott R. from Sherman Oaks. He's at the podium a lot, and geez, I like what he has to say. It looks like he's got a pretty good program. I asked him to be my sponsor, and that's when my miracle started, you know. He said, sure. He didn't say it immediately. His wife gave him a nudge and said, you better sponsor this guy. He looks like he really wants it. He said, I'm a little busy, and she went, but Scott said, I want you to call me every day for 7 days. You'd be surprised how many men can't do that. And I've sponsored a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that just can't make that call just to get to know each other a little bit, you know. He said, I'd like you to get up in the morning and say, I'm powerless, my life's unmanageable, but I know you're going to restore me to sanity, so I'm yours. What I didn't know was he had me working the first 3 steps. So within a month's time, I'm taking a chip, a real chip, and I'm starting to feel good about the journey. Now I see guys bouncing in and out, and I go over to him and I say, Scott, I think this 4th step is important. So he reminded me in the big book, it says, vital, crucial, and infinitely grave that we do this. If we don't do it, we're sure to drink again. And if we drink, we're going to die someday, you know. So I said, okay, let's do this 4th step. And I made an appointment, got up to his house, big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, coffee pot, 2 drunks. That's when a miracle began. You know, he sat me down, he read me chapter 5, just like we read it at every meeting, all through the A, B's, and C's, the 3 pertinent ideas God couldn't, would have foresaw it. Goes on and it talks about the inventories. He said, okay, first of all, we hit our knees. We took that 3rd step. He said, are you ready to take this 3rd step formally? I said, yeah. So we hit our knees and we crossed arms and we read the 3rd step prayer out of this beautiful book here. And when I got off my knees, you know, the book talks about it. It says, when we do this with any kind of a humble effort, an effect, sometimes a very great one, is felt at once. That's what happened for me. I got off my knees with this man that I just met, and I felt like my nightmare was over, that I had a shot at the rest of my life. It was really amazing. You know, and if you haven't really memorized the third step prayer yet, I beg of you to just go home and look at it. It is deep. I mean, it's beyond hippie deep. It's just such a great prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, and build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. That's what's wrong with me. I got a problem with myself. Take away my difficulties. What are my difficulties? My character defects. That's what I'm going to find out in the fourth step. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy love. What's victory over them? That means so I can help the next guy coming along. Show him how he can find what his character defects are and start that dialogue with God so he can get sober and get on with his life. Stop drinking. So that third step prayer was really, really big for me. Now, he says, get some paper out. I want you to draw some lines on it. We're going to do this 3 lists. A resentment list, a fear list, and a sexual inventory. Said the resentment is the number 1 offender, so that's the number 1 list. Boom. He says, now, do you have any resentments? I said, not that I can think of. So what about that guy in England that screwed you out all that money? I said, well, yeah, him, I guess. So he said, put his name down. I put his name down. He says, now, what was the cause? Well, he promised me pay for work. I did work. He didn't pay. Boom. There's a cause. He says, now look on the bottom of page 64 of our big book. And let's see how this affected your life, this resentment. Bottom of page 64, it says, these areas of our lives get affected by these resentments: self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, person, relationship, and sex. Did it affect your self-esteem, he said? I said, sure, I thought I was a loser. Did it affect your pocketbook? I said, were you listening? Did it affect your ambition? I said, of course, the next band might be the same damn thing. Did it affect your personal relationships? Yeah, I could not say this man's name without putting MF behind it, if you know what I mean. And did it affect your sex? Everything does. So he says, good, that's a 5-bagger, you got a good start there. So now he says, now here comes the good part. Turn that paper over, and on the top I want you to write, what is the fault in God? What is the fault in me that if God would come along and pluck it out of me, I would no longer have this resentment? I said, wait a minute. What do you mean the fault in me? I mean, I moved from top of the heap, New York, to England. He screwed me out of all this money. He says, we're not taking his inventory. We're taking yours. We want you to look at it from an entirely different angle and be tough on yourself. Just this one time. So I thought, I said, well, there's millions of dollars floating around here, and I'm working on a hippie handshake. So I never asked for a contract. Guess that would make me irresponsible. That's a good starting place. So I don't know about you, but when I'm irresponsible, it's usually because I'm afraid to bring it up. That brings in fear of confrontation. Next, I'll show you, I'll freeze you right out of my life, comes silent scorn, then emotional blackmail, then character assassination, then I'm on a roll. That's the way I think. That's the way my sick brain thinks. You know, and all that is you know, it talks about it in page 62 where it talks about selfish, self-centered, that we think is the root of our troubles. Well, for me, I figured out it's a little bit more. I'm special, you know. But it's selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, self-righteous, self-delusion, self-pity. I got all kinds of problems with self going on here, and that's all this stuff is, you know. So I got some of those character defects down. He said, okay, the second list is easy. Fear. We're driven by 100 forms of fear, fancied or real. If it's not a real fear, we'll make one up. We feel more comfortable in that state of fear, thinking about ourselves all the time. Just list the stuff you're afraid of. I said, yeah, so what? What am I going to do next? He says, the big book says, we say, Father, please remove this horrible fear and turn my attention as to what you would have me do or be instead. And then, he said, the best line in the big book for me is, when we do that, immediately we commence to outgrow the fear. That's a pretty good deal. It doesn't have that power to send me back to that bar that I used to drink at, because I've just written it down and asked God to remove it. I had to do the sexual inventory, you know, and I'll not get into that too much, because we've all gotten here with a couple of things that we're not too proud of, and it's just going to ask us to look at places where somebody was hurt, and then ask a couple questions. Where was I selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? How could I have unjustifiably aroused suspicion, bitterness, or jealousy, and what could I have done instead? Where was I selfish? I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it. Where was I dishonest? I didn't tell her I was married. Where was I inconsiderate? I didn't give a shit what she felt like in the morning. How could I have unjustifiably aroused suspicion, bitterness, or jealousy every time I left the house? My wife knew that put alcohol in me, I'm capable of anything. So I had to put that down in paper and give it to God too, you know. Now I'd gone back to Pennsylvania, second year of sobriety. I went back there to make amends and cleaned up the mess with that church, put a big note in the church, went up to the family tombstones and cried like a baby at what had become of my life, you know. And a couple of years, I was 5 years sober at the time, my mom called me up and she said, you know, the doctors have just, they've found an aneurysm in my aorta going into my heart, and they think it's going to kill me, and they got to do a surgery, and it's a pretty nasty surgery, and I'm scared. I said, well, Mom, if only you were an alcoholic, you know, because we got ways of dealing with fear. You know, I'm here and she's in Pennsylvania, and she says, well, what do you do? And I said, well, we just write it down, and then we ask, you're a good church woman, you know, like, ask God to remove the fear. And she says, well, then what? I said, well, it becomes less because we ask God to remove it. So it doesn't have that crippling effect on us. So she started doing this. We talk every day. She's getting stronger and getting ready for this surgery. And I'll be damned if the doctor didn't postpone it for 30 more days, you know. She went to absolute terror. And I had to give her the best that I get from you on a daily basis. And we talk every day. And I'd get her ready for this thing. And flew home for the surgery. And my sister and I were there. My brother couldn't make it, but we spent the night with my mom and kissed her goodbye into the surgery, thinking everything, it's going to be rough, but she's going to make it, you know, and she didn't make it. It was just too bad. And she's only 74, but it was too bad. They didn't work. And so next day we're up at the house and going through her papers, getting ready for the funeral and stuff. And we found this journal that she'd been keeping. And, you know, and in the journal it said how her son and his wonderful program of Alcoholics Anonymous made the last days of her life so much better than they would have been. Now, I was just so overpaid, just for that alone, you know. And that night, I was the last one with her down in the funeral home, and I had my 5-year medallion. And I put it in her hand, I closed her hand, then I closed the coffin. I got to remember where I left that. I don't ever want to go back to that way of life again, you know. And that day when I put my mother in the ground next to my father and my grandparents and a family plot, I didn't stand there weeping shamefully of what I'd let myself become. I stood there proud to be a man that Alcoholics Anonymous turned into a real man. I was proud of who I'd become. You know, it was pretty amazing. And I came back from that trip back east, and then I realized now I got to make amends to that guy in England too. And I got to make amends without asking for the check, because when I left the band, I hurt him. So I had made amends over the years to him. I wasn't quite sure. You know, he's like a major guy. We talked a little bit, wrote him a couple of letters. You just don't know, you know. And he lost his wife several years ago to breast cancer, and they had a big memorial for her in New York, and we were invited in. So I said, well, part of my amends, we better go in, just bite the bullet and go, you know. We should be there for him. And, you know, when I heard the news that his wife passed away, I mean, here was a guy that I hated for 25 years, 28 years, whatever it was. I couldn't say his name without MF behind it. And immediately, I picked up the phone and I called him, and I was just there for him, because another guy in a long-term relationship, and Alcoholics Anonymous did a miracle on me that I could be that compassionate for another human being. And so we're at the memorial, figuring we'll get stuck in the back of the church someplace, you know, and we walk in, and we're ushered right up to the front of the church, sat right across from the family. I said, I think our amends have been made, or my amends have been made here. And we had a great talk afterwards, and, you know, I felt really good about it. And then a couple of years back, I heard that they were going to re-release some of our old music 30 years later. I said, what the hell, why would people, if they liked our music, they have it. They ain't going to buy it again, you know. I mean, what the hell? So I asked my buddy at the record company, and I said, what's this thing going to do, you know? He said, well, we're shipping 2 million units tomorrow. Oh, no, I can't watch all this money go by again. And by now, I mean, Dr. Paul was my grand sponsor for a little while, and other sponsors that I had, they all told me to stay away from this thing. Paul, not so much Paul, but they said, give the problem to God, let God deal with it. And I learned how to do that, and I got some peace behind it, but now it was all stirred up again because all of that money is floating around again. So I had a new sponsor, and we were sponsoring each other. It was another guy, same amount of time, and he said, well, why don't you write a letter to the guy and let him know exactly what happened without one of those kind of letters, you know, just a loving letter telling him what you've been living with and what was the deal you got when you were, you know, just lay it out. And I said, geez, I really don't know. This is God's stuff. He says, what do you got to lose? I'd never heard that before. What do you got to lose? And I wrote this I didn't write this letter. You wrote this letter for me, and I sent it off to the guy. I know that the guy read the letter, picked up the phone, called me, and he was in tears. He said, Denny, I am so sorry. Had no idea. I had an idea. I damn near killed myself, you know. And he didn't even know what the hell I was talking about, you know. He thought his business people took care of me. Yeah, they took care of me. So at the end of this wonderful conversation, he said, I'm going to make this right. Which really, you know, this was like full circle. I mean, anybody that knew me, I had some really tough years of sobriety. And I had made a deal with God. I said, look, I don't give a shit. I don't ever want to live like that. I don't care if I never see a dime from those days. I'm done with it. It's yours. And I had to mean it. And when I meant it is when this thing came full circle. You know, one day he sent me some money and, you know, today our future looks a whole lot brighter than it used to, you know. And, I mean, I've learned to expect miracles around here. We're all miracles, but I learned to expect it. Dr. Paul always used to end his talk with saying that, you know, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Catch alcoholism. It's the only disease known to mankind. When you catch it, you become a better person. You don't get that with any other diseases. And all we have to do to keep it is to give it away. And all that the disease asks of us, in fact, it insists that we be happy, joyous, and free. I don't know about you, but happy, joyous, and free was not in my vocabulary. I still had bar tabs, you know. So I finally figured it out over the years. Happy, joyous, and free is a life free of resentments, fears, and unsolvable sexual problems. Have fun with it. Thanks.
Thanks, Denny.